14 states will close their polls, worth more than 150 electoral votes. Stay with us for NBC News continuing coverage of Decision 2012. More polls closing in just a moment. We will be back in just a moment.
Decision 2012 Election Night continues. Here's Brian Williams.
Now, on a cold night in New York City, where the polls have just closed, by the way, here the crowd is truly pushing into 30 Rockefeller Plaza as we get closer to the business end of this evening. We've just had, as I said, a number of poll closings. We have a fresh list. We'll walk you through it right now. These were just handed to us. Colorado, critical state out west, too close to call. Minnesota, too early to call. Note the distinction. Wisconsin, too early to call. Obama leads. Obama leads Wisconsin, though officially too early to call. A hold here for the Republicans. Big state of Texas, a lot of electoral votes. Mitt Romney, as expected. In New York, President Obama, as expected. In the state of Michigan, President Obama. In Louisiana, Romney, stitching together the red Republican South. Through the Midwest, in Kansas, Romney. New Mexico, President Obama. In Nebraska, Mitt Romney. North and South Dakota, paint them red for Mitt Romney. Wyoming, Mitt Romney. Arizona, where the polls just closed, too early to call. 11 electoral votes. Let's take a look at the new. As of 9 o'clock in the east, 6 on the west coast. The new electoral map. The red for the Republican Party now runs border to border, north to south. And you see the familiar blue of the Democrats, what familiar from the last election cycle. Let's look at some of these Senate races and how the balance stands right now, because we've had some results in the closely watched Stabenow, for example, in Michigan, the projected winner, the incumbent, going back. In Minnesota, Amy Klobuchar is going back to the Senate, as is Kristen Gillibrand here in New York. Hardly had to break a sweat in her re-election campaign. Interesting guy, Ted Cruz in Texas, running with Tea Party support. Princeton undergrad, Harvard Law. Barrasso going back to the Senate, Republican incumbent from Wyoming. And in Nebraska, a very interesting Senate race there. We have it as too early to call. Bob Kerrey, the former senator, Medal of Honor recipient, former head of the New School, running against Deb Fischer. To Chuck Todd we go. Chuck, whole slew of numbers there, and we have a lot of battlegrounds hanging out there with no result.
We do, but, you know, the Michigan call, the fact that was a poll close call, that tells you a little bit something. You know, had that been, again, what Mitt Romney's campaign had been pushing, is that their national momentum would naturally make states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, perhaps Minnesota closer, and at least we wouldn't be able to call them right away. So the Michigan call, a little bit of a clue here. But look, we're talking about, this is so far not exactly the way, the night that I think that Romney would hope for. None of these have been called yet, but there is good news for him in the state of North Carolina, a state that the president carried, but we're not close to calling it yet. He's got a very narrow lead. But if you dig into the numbers and you look at the most important county, which is Wake County there, right there, the largest county that was Bush 04, Obama 08, as you can see here, Mitt Romney with a narrow lead, and it's a huge improvement from 4 years ago for the Republican there. This was a county that the president carried by big margins, and it's a swing county. So that gives you a sense at North Carolina why things, of all the states, was all the battleground states, the assumption was there. But I keep coming back to Florida. we knew Virginia, Brian, was going to be a right with where the national vote is. And our national exit poll, our pollsters, Bill McInturb and Peter Hart, are looking at it, and it looks a lot like our last NBC Wall Street Journal poll. Looks like it could be a 1-point popular vote lead there in either direction. So having Virginia that close isn't a surprise. But the fact that this Florida is this close, I can tell you there's a lot of Republicans. Look how much of the vote is in there, 72% of the vote. The president's lead is holding on. He's getting those big numbers. I told you earlier about how well he's doing in the I-4 corridor, in particular Orlando. He's doing very well. But see here, blue, this was the other part of Florida I was telling you about, Hillsborough and Pinellas. These are very important swing counties, Bush 04, Obama 08. If they're staying blue, we're at 72%. We're not saying all the votes counted in there, but that's a good sign for the president. A lot of blue in that I-4 corridor. Not a good sign for Mitt Romney right now.
Hey, Chuck, as I show people the outside of our building, can you call up Ohio and pick 1 or 2 counties you like looking at and tell us?
You got it. I'd love to. The problem in Ohio is we still got a lot of vote that hasn't come in Ohio there, and I can tell you that that's been a concern. I looked at the county map. We don't have a lot of county returns. I can tell you that John Yang did some, went into Hamilton. He's in Hamilton County, and I've been telling you, Hamilton County, that Bush 04 county, Obama 08, in the early vote, the president led 57-42 in the early vote. That was John Yang. He went directly and got those results from the county there, just among the early vote. We're still piecing it together here in our boiler room, but that's potentially a good sign for the president. They hit numbers that some Republicans didn't expect the Democrats to hit again in Hamilton County there, Brian.
All right. Chuck Todd, thanks. We're going to check in real quick with Kristen Welker and Peter Alexander. They are